Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his treatise On Tranquility, Plutarch cautions us against making comparisons of our own situation, our own case. Sometimes we use the word fate, our lot, to that of others. And he actually begins that section by saying that, it would be best if you really just paid attention to your own situation, examine or focus on yourself and your fortunes. But if you can't do that, then you can make things better for yourself by focusing on the right people to compare yourself with. And he's going to tell us about a super, super common mistake that most people tend to make, which is to focus on people who are in some sense better off, or we could translate it as superior. Hupo ekontas, the huper is above, and the ekontas holding or being set above. And he's going to give us a whole interesting set of examples of this that I think some of us could easily relate to. So he says, those who are in prison account fortunate, those who've been set free. Understandable, right? Even if you're in a good prison system and not a terrible one, it kind of sucks not to have your freedom. And those who've been set free envy those who were born free, in part because there's a social stigma attached to having been liberated as opposed to being born free. And then you would say, okay, great. So now everything is wonderful. No. Those who are born free are going to envy those who are citizens. Not everybody in ancient societies was a full member of the society, a citizen. We kind of take that for granted, but, in ancient times, that wasn't something that you would take for granted. So wouldn't it be great to be a citizen? All right, you're a citizen. Are you happy now? Well, no. Because now I wish I was rich. I wish that I had the resources that not every citizen has, but, some of them do, and it's awfully nice for them, and you become rich, and now we go up even further and further. Wouldn't it be nice not just to be rich, but to have political authority? He talks about satraps. So these were the governors of Persian territories. You could think of, any sort of position, being in charge of something, not just being rich. And then the satraps, are they happy with their condition? No, because they wish that they were kings. They wish that they were rulers, monarchs. And at least, when we get to that level as human beings, you must be content at that point. And he says, no, the kings are envious of and consider fortunate the gods. And he says, scarcely stopping short of desiring the power to produce thunder and lightning. So what can we draw from this? He says that in every one of these cases, somebody is focusing on what it is that they lack, on what they don't have. And dei. So dei is necessity. And so to be in necessity, you're lacking something. And because you focus on what you don't have, you don't have something else that's really important, which we can translate as gratitude or joy. The Greek term for it is charis. They lack gratitude for the situation that they're in. And, we get some really interesting examples here of different people who want this, who want that. Some want to wear the patrician shoe. Others, when they wear it, they weep because they're not praetors. If they're praetors, they're not consuls. And we see the same sort of chain again. And we can think about this in our own time, right? With our own status symbols and powers. And it doesn't just have to be in terms of wealth and position and freedom. It could also be in terms of, romantic relationships. Oh, I've got my partner for life, but I wish I had somebody who was more attractive or more accomplished. Well, aren't you lucky you've got somebody who actually will put up with you and thinks that you're worth sticking with? Why are you looking over there if it's just going to make you ungrateful and unhappy? So he is going to suggest that we put things into perspective. So one way that we can do this, he says that we can remind ourselves, instead of sitting down, as he says, in sorrow and dejection. And the word for dejection, tapenomenos, it's often translated in other contexts as modesty or humility or something like that. Being low, right? Oh, my stuff is no good, right? So he says that what we can do is remind ourselves, and it's interesting because the Greek terms that he uses here, murion, muriakis, right? So this is the word for 10,000. We can remind ourselves that we are living, as he's going to say, 10,000 times, it just means an infinite amount, basically. Some incomparable amount. 10,000 times better and more suitably than 10,000s of other people. And, this works even better in our own time. If you think about Plutarch's time, we're like, we've got, even if we're poor, running water and toilets and refrigeration and, you're watching this most likely or listening to it across this vast thing that we call the internet. We live like gods by comparison to previous peoples. But even back in his own time, Plutarch is saying, man, you've actually got it pretty good compared to a lot of other people. And you should think about that, right? So if you do that, you will go on praising your own guardian spirit, your daimon, and your own way of living. You'll be happy with it. Then he's got a really interesting metaphor here. He says, if you go to the Olympics, now going to the Olympics, is that going to happen for most of us? No, but assume that you could. If you go to the Olympics, do you get to pick your competition? Hell no. They put you together and, maybe it's the boxing thing and, you go in there and, oh no, it's Mike Tyson and he's going to beat the crap out of me, right? Mike Tyson in his prime. None of us are going to stand up against him. Or we're going to have to race against, some famous sprinter, something along those lines. So he says, in life, though, you can actually choose your competitors based on how you're going to understand the competition. So he says, you can take pride of some sort in your superiority to others. And instead of being envious yourself, you can be the object of envy to other people. Now, he's not saying, make everybody feel bad or something like that. Plutarch is just taking it for granted that people do tend to be envious of other people. So do you want to be the person that other people are envying, or do you want to be consumed with that envy yourself, you can say? And well, there's a very easy way to do this. Don't choose competitors. Don't choose objects of comparison that are totally beyond you, like a Hercules. None of us are going to measure up to Hercules. He is a legendary character who, in some of the legends, actually doesn't just perform all these heroic activities. he becomes a god. Is that what's going to happen with you? Are you going to have 10 great labors that you're known for? You're probably not even going to have one on the scale that Hercules is doing. So it's stupid if you set yourself up as a competitor to somebody like Hercules. The other one that he chooses is even further out there. It's one of the Titans, Briareus, right? Who has, if I remember right, he's one of the 100 armed Titans that fights in the Great War. How many arms do you got? 2, just like me, most likely. And not super strong, not titanic strength. So don't choose competitors like that. If we're going to talk about philosophy, you get to read great books. You get to read Plutarch and Plato and René Descartes. Do you need to set yourself up as a competitor to them? Ooh, if I can't be as brilliant as René Descartes, then my studies in philosophy are no good. That's stupid. You don't have to choose that. And yet a lot of people seem to do that. So he says, whenever you're lost in admiration of a man born in his litter, so that's a carrying thing. You've got people who are, it's on their shoulders and they're carrying this guy who's laying down. As being superior to yourself, you're looking up. Lower your eyes and look at the litter bearers also, and you're not going to be as upset by that. So, consider the state of mind that other people have about you. Are you in an enviable position? I think most of us can find ways in which we're far better off than other people who could say, what are you belly aching about? You've actually got it pretty good. Why are you focusing on what you don't have? He's got this great example of Socrates, who is in a city with some friends. It's probably Athens, we must imagine, right? And so his friends are saying things like, Chian wine costs a mina. Now, Chian wine is one of the best wines that you can get. A mina is a lot of money. A purple robe costs 3 minae. Okay, so purple is the most expensive dye. It's very labor productive. You got to get it from these shellfish. And, a lot of people were happy just if they had a little stripe of purple. A purple robe, a robe that is entirely purple, costs 3 minae. Yeah, of course it does, right? And he goes on and says, a half pint of honey costs 5 drachmas, right? And so then Socrates leads them to the marketplace where you can get half a peck of flour for an obol. An obol is a tiny little coin. Then to the olive market, a quart for 2 coppers. Then to the clothes market, you can get a sleeveless vest for 10 drachmas. His friends are saying, the city is so expensive. Socrates saying, it's cheap. It's cheap if you know how to live right. If you're not having these crazy expensive tastes that you're setting your expectations super, super high. Now, what's the analogy here? He says, whenever we hear another say that our affairs are, not important and in a woeful plight because we don't have any big political power, we can actually say to ourselves, our affairs, our pragmata, the things that we're doing are great. They're awesome. Right? Splendid is how it's translated here. Lampra, right? They're shining, we might say. And here's a really interesting thing. He says, our life is, and it's translated as enviable, but it's actually emulable. It's zelotos. It's something that people could look to and feel like, oh man, that's really good. I wish I could measure up and have something like that. And so he says, why is that the case? Well, because we don't beg or carry burdens or live by flattery, right? These are not the things that we have to do. And then he says, because we have these bad habits, we're accustomed to look at everybody else and not ourselves. And because we have envy and malice and we don't rejoice in our own blessings as much as we're pained by those that other people possess, we should do a different approach, right? So if we're going to envy superior people, rather than actually be grateful about how we're doing, then he suggests we become more realistic. So he tells us that draw aside the gaudy curtain of their repute and outward appearance, pull aside the veil, and get inside there, and you'll see a lot of disagreeable things that they have to deal with. So, prime example, Pittacus, who is, an important politician. His fame for bravery and wisdom and justice was great. He was entertaining some guests, and what happens? His wife comes in, and, in anger, it's actually urge here, met urges, she turns over the table, right? And the guests were all upset. And Pittacus says, these things are going to happen. Every one of us has some trouble. The person that has only mine, a wife who gets, upset and, ruins the party, is doing well indeed. So, this is a great approach. You think about you're sick and you're like, oh man, I have arthritis in my limbs. This sucks. My life is over. I'll never be able to do what I want to do. And somebody else could come along and say, wow, you think you got troubles, man? I not only have arthritis, I've got gout. And I'm on all these pills that I have to take, and then pills to counteract the side effects of those pills. And if you look at that sort of situation, you can be like, oh man, I'm actually pretty lucky. Again, with significant others, you could be like, so Supertramp has this great song that goes, don't you look at my girlfriend, she's the only one I've got. Not much of a girlfriend, I never seem to get a lot. And, so this is kind of a whiner point of view. You could be like, buddy, you've actually got a girlfriend. And, she may not be exactly what you're looking for in terms of attractiveness, but is she, decent to you? Is she enjoyable to hang out with? Count your blessings, idiot. That's what Plutarch would say. And we could go on and on and on. I'm only making this amount of money and I can't buy myself a new car like my neighbor can. Yeah, but he's got all sorts of troubles to earn that money. You don't have to go kiss anybody's rear in order to do that, right? So he says that we can use all of these reflections. The Greek term for that is epilogismos, right? Reasoning processes to engage in less fault-finding, less complaining with, it's translated here as fate, but chance. Touche is the term. How things turn out, right? We don't have to be complaining about that. If we're stuck admiring, thaumatzen, our neighbor's chance or lot or fate, then, as he's going to say, it actually is debasing, lowering. Again, we have that same term of becoming modest or humiliated. And it's translated here as destroying, but I think that better translation of katabalontos, throwing things down, like when we throw something down on the ground. We take our fate and we throw it on the ground because it's no good. It is our fate. It is pretty good by comparison to others. If you have the time to sit around and read Plutarch, you're actually doing pretty good. So, some really on-point advice and reflections here, reasonings that can help us be more happy with our condition. If we're going to make comparisons to other people, we need to put them in proper perspective.